Hello, and welcome to True Horrors with Meg and Rachel. Every week, we discuss a horror film and the true stories that inspired, influenced, or bear striking resemblance to them. Be warned for spoilers and adult themes. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Meg.
And this is True Horrors.
Why, hello, everyone.
Oh, hi.
Surprised to see you here.
We've done this exact opening like 4 times.
Well, maybe you should start saying words when it starts.
I'm just saying, I'm just acknowledging that it's something we've done. I don't know how to open this, which that's why you always do it.
Next one, I'm just going to stare you down until you say something. And we'll just have audio silence so that you'll go, hey. And I'll go, hey.
You know what's funny, Meg? There won't be silence. It'll get edited out.
I won't let him. I'll be like, Matt, have the silence in there. They'll be like, what? Did I hit play? Is it going? Is it going?
Did Castbox suddenly close again? That's one of my things.
No one gets that reference.
Castbox is my podcast app that I
know.
use.
Only you. Okay, so it was your pick this week.
It was. I chose Night of the Living Dead, the original from 1968. And before I even started watching it, I wrote on the top, God, I really hope this holds up given my track record this season. I've picked a lot of classics that ended up being terrible.
Mm-hmm.
This was not one of them. This one was exactly as good as I remember it being.
So you had seen it. I'd never seen it before.
I had seen it one time.
This is what I wrote at the top of my page. I know 2 things about this movie: zombies and how it ends.
Great.
Because it's one of the most famous endings in horror history.
I had forgotten the ending until the scene came up and I was like, oh my God, we'll get to that later, but we'll go.
No, so I was thinking it the whole time. I was thinking about it the whole time because I knew they all end up dead and Ben ends up dead in a pretty devastating way.
Yeah.
I mean, I liked this movie. I will say I liked it a lot better at around the 45 or 50 minute mark when it stopped being just Ben and Barbara, because Barbara was not holding her own. No. A character that's gone completely catatonic is not a good scene partner.
No.
So once they added other people, I was like, okay, we're in it.
Yes.
We're in this. It sped up a lot. There was a point where I was like, do they even need dialogue in this movie? Because there doesn't seem to be any. I wrote, I need more talking, more zombies, just more of something.
More of something.
And they added more people. They took the note.
You didn't like all the construction scenes?
So many construction scenes.
Also, can we talk about Barbara's contribution? Those tiny ass little pieces of wood. The fuck are we gonna do with that, Barbara?
I mean, at this point, that should have just been a montage with a song in the background. I was like, what is happening?
Mm-hmm.
But back to the beginning, I was really roasting Johnny in the beginning. Yeah. I definitely thought he was, again, I didn't know anything about it. I thought he was going to be a character throughout it, and I was just roasting him the whole time. But I was like, you only have to make this drive once a year. Yes. Stop complaining. Also, it's 3 hours.
Yes.
6 hours round trip.
So the thing that gets me is, why did they leave at 5 p.m.? That's such a weird time to leave for a trip that's going to take all day. And she gives him shit about taking so long to get ready. And I'm like, what? Did he wake up at 3 o'clock? How did it take him the entire day to get ready for this trip?
Even if you want to be generous and say that they started so late they stopped for dinner, it still means they left at 4.
Yes.
So yeah, it would mean that maybe he slept till 12 or 1, which I'm not judging, but I am judging on the day that you have to drive 6 hours round trip to put a wreath on your father's grave or whatever they were putting on his grave. It definitely had flowers though, because she said it might have been one of those flower shaped crosses. Mm-hmm. But either way, and then he's bitching about it and oh, they probably just fix it up and resell you the whole one. I was just like, are you going to be like this the whole zombie apocalypse? Like, but instead he died. Also didn't get that they were siblings. And once I found out they were siblings, it annoyed me a lot less. Because I was like, oh yeah, if he was your boyfriend or your husband and it was his father, I would be like, he's being a real dick. But I'm like, oh no, he's just being a sibling. Like,
yeah. But also, it's your father. Like, what a weird vibe to bring. Like, what did he abuse your whole family or something? Like,
no, he said it's because he doesn't really remember him. And so I was like, so your father died when you were young, and all your mother asks is that you once a year put something on his grave, and you're like, I don't even remember the guy. Like, like, no, it didn't seem like they had any, like, they didn't bring up any kind of complaints except that he doesn't remember him.
Right. And I also have no idea who the older sibling is. So, like, do neither of them remember him? Does Barbara remember him, but he doesn't? Like,
I guess I kind of assumed he was the older sibling from the graveyard story of when they came to visit it, because he was kind of making it seem like she wouldn't remember that as well as he does. So it made me think he was older. Right. But it was also like a weird amount of background when you're going to kill him and she's never going to speak again.
I know.
Which I can make this complaint throughout the entire movie, but I just kept shouting, how do you know each other's names? Because they just kept introducing names, but never saying when they said them. I literally went to IMDb because I was like, I couldn't take the fact that I didn't know Ben's name for so long.
It took a really long time.
It took a really long time. And then it's not that he introduces them. Someone mentions him. And I'm like, how do you, what? So that's the scene you cut, is them having an introduction, but I have to see every piece of wood get put up. Like, also, I've never seen zombies like this. I've never seen the OG type of zombie. I have to say, respect for the OG, but like, we've improved upon them. And I don't mean the fast moving. I like slow moving zombies. I mean the fact that they know how to use tools and have critical thinking skills. I just have a lot of questions about that. Like, and I know that he wasn't getting deep into the mythology. It was the first movie, but like, the fact that they had such critical thinking capability and could use tools and plot, like, I don't like that. Not in a sense of like danger. It was more like, huh? Like, like when he picked up that rock and burst in the car door, I was like, what the fuck? Is he actually not a zombie?
Well, never mind. It's going to tread too much on my story later. And I haven't seen any of Romero's other zombie movies, but I get the impression they're always kind of like that. They always have the ability to use tools and have a little bit of critical thinking, but I can't say for certain.
Yeah, not a fan of that. I do like I said, I do prefer a slow moving zombie. I think when they can move fast, I'm just like, you know, like I'm less like about that. But again, the idea of them being mindless is something that, like, it's weird, but them being able to use tools makes me less afraid of them. And I don't know why that is, but I was like, oh yeah, you're going to pick up that rock, but you don't understand that like this stick has fire on it. Like you're like,
yeah, because they're terrified of fire.
Like either they understand or they don't. Like me bursting out, holding a torch, being like, let's have a discussion right now because I'm guessing some of you can talk or some bullshit. Like,
they also go from early in the film, Ben says that they don't make any noise, to groaning a lot by the end of it. Just saying, pick a lane.
Exactly. And the thing is when was this the first mainstream zombie movie? Like, did he invent the concept?
Yes,
as we know it?
Yes and no. Again, that's what I'm gonna talk about later. But the modern zombie that we think of, he invented.
So I guess when you're doing that, you don't have to figure things out as much, you know. But like if you're building on that, you need to have some kind of strict rules, you know.
Right. There is no genre for him to work within. Which again, that's why they never call them zombies in this. They get called ghouls, not zombies. People.
Well, they don't call them zombies in The Walking Dead either.
Well, yes.
Despite how much that annoys me.
That's a conscious choice on their part for I mean, it's a conscious choice on Romero's part too, but like people in the real world just started calling them zombies. So he was like, fine, they're zombies.
Oh, that's interesting.
We'll get to it.
That's really interesting. Also that car crash, what the fuck is up with her? Is she just trying to go for an award of the most useless person in a horror movie?
She
Like
is.
she was not driving that fast. It's not like we saw it crash. She just careened into a tree.
Yeah.
It reminded me of oh, go on.
I was gonna say she could have just backed up and kept going.
Yes, it also didn't seem like the car was damaged. It reminds me of the first time I ever hit something with my car, which it was like the kind of rocks they put, like decorative rocks, and I was avoiding a squirrel, but like I didn't slam on my brakes. I just like I wasn't going that fast, so I just kind of scraped it, and it was like, oh, well, you know what I did? I pulled back, and then I kept driving.
Yep.
Like, because the car was still functional.
Yeah. No, every now and again, as I was watching this movie, again, because I had seen it before, I kept playing a game where I was like, I think that's the last time Barbara speaks in this entire movie. And then like 10 minutes later, she'd say one thing and I'm like, oh, I think that's the last time. I think that's Barbara's last line. And she just kept occasionally saying things.
I mean,
I just kept losing that game.
Hell, I half expected the zombie to get behind the wheel of the car and chase her. I mean, who's to say here? Just like coming for her, just in the car, be like, this car is perfectly fine. I wonder why she left it. Like, pick up some zombie friends.
Yeah, eat some brains over at the next house. These people are working too hard. Let's go find an easier meal.
Yeah. No, she wasn't obviously the worst person in this movie. But also, I was really afraid halfway through that we weren't going to get any other characters. And I was like, there have to be more characters. I'm sure there are, because she was giving Ben nothing. And let me just say that Ben is my hero in every respect. I love him, but also it's one of those things where I'm also like, I love him, but I also feel like he's the way I would react in this situation. So there's a bit of that line of like, is it that I see myself in him, that I love him? Is it both? But like, the way he was behaving, I was like, wow, like he is on it. He got it. Can you give him anything? Like he was so like good. Like he took control of that situation. He was not panicking. He took control of everybody's situation. And he was right to slap her. Yeah. That's all I'm saying. Like she was freaking out. I was like, your brother's dead. He's not going out there I'm like, and if this is really a good movie, we're going to see him again so he can come eat you. Yep. And then we did. Yeah. But no. And then when she slapped Ben and Ben slapped her back, I was like, good. Good.
I had two reactions. One, which is, God, apparently that's just the way you solve all hysterical women in black and white movies. And two, you hit her way harder than she hit you. Like,
I definitely respect that though, because I'm like, she needed a nap. Like when she went to sleep, I was like, she needed a timeout. Like she needed a severe timeout. Even in normal crises, and Rachel knows this, I kind of can't stand when people panic like that. I have more of like everything kind of slows down, methodical thinking, like it seems like Ben does. And so when somebody gets that hysterical, I mean, I can't say I would never slap someone. If I'd been in Ben's situation, I would, but I never have in my life. But I get that urge where I'm just like, stop it. If you can't handle things, sit in the corner, take a nap, like recharge your batteries, come back and join the group when you've calmed the fuck down. Like I also wrote, and I don't know if this is going to get too far off into the weeds, but I wrote Heat of the Night walked so this movie could run. Which Rachel gets that reference, but it's one of my favorite movies of all time. And Sidney Poitier, who is an African-American man, slaps a white man across the face. And it was the first time that was done. And this movie came out a year before that. And that movie was saying something about race, which we're going to talk about what this movie was or wasn't saying. But when I saw that, I was like, Heat of the Night had to come first because I know that Heat of the Night happened first. And like, that's another slap. I'm like, that's my number one favorite movie slap.
We'll get to it when we, really dive into it. But this scene was not written specifically for a black man. It was
No,
just
I know.
written. He was just cast because he was the better one. So like the best actor. So that scene was clearly written with a white guy in mind, and they just didn't change it.
Which I also think,
respect.
I know, I was going to say, I think a lot of this stuff not changing because it was colorblind casting is a real power move. But I also, we'll get to it, but I'm also like, you can't have not known what you were doing when you cast him. Like, I understand he was the best, but it gives this movie such depth that we will get to. We will get to.
Again, Romero claims, like, to this day, he was not trying to make a point. I'm like, fuck you, man. Yes, you were.
I understand he was the best, but then when you cast him, you didn't think, hey, this reads a little different. This hits a little different. When he is apparently the only black man in the world.
Yes.
Like, got some whole Star Wars vibe going on there. Like, I just kept writing, have they exchanged names? Because they didn't.
Nope.
But you know what? Barbara was right. You know what we needed in that montage? A creepy music box. You know, good for her.
The fuck? What was that? Why?
I don't know. I mean, I was like, why are you doing that? Like, is it not sufficiently weird enough? Like, you're like, oh, look at this music box from this dead woman.
Right? I mean, it's already a zombie apocalypse. We should maybe add some ghosts to it.
I feel a spiritual connection to this man that I wrote, seriously, bitch, calm down. Like, when he was like, you need to take a minute. I was like, she really does, though, several minutes. Like, then when she was like, we need to go get Johnny, I was like, let her go. She is clearly dragging you down. Open the door and be like, bye.
I thought the same thing. It's like, just let her go. Like, she's worse than useless right now, because it's not that she's not helping. She's actively hurting you at this point.
So let's go to when those people came, and I had to rewind it because I was like, how did they get in? We had to watch for 2 hours of my life while they boarded this up. And then they were in the cellar, and I was like, drag him, Ben, because they clearly heard Barbara screaming and they stayed down there like cowards. Like, and he wouldn't let it go. He wouldn't let it go. And I'm like, don't let it go because they're lying. And then I wrote, Mr. Cooper is going to be a problem. And Ben already knew. Like, Ben read that situation.
Ben's been in that situation a bunch of times.
This is the kind of stuff where I'm like, Romero, are you really telling me you weren't saying anything there? Because Ben was like, no, I'm not giving you the gun. You're not doing anything. Like, shut up. Oh, I'm sorry. This was the moment where I was like, this movie needs to become real. I'm going to save Ben's life, and then I'm going to marry him. And it was the point where he said, it's tough for that kid that her old man is that stupid.
Yes, it's the best line in the whole movie.
Oh my God. It was savage. It was amazing. Like,
he just thought of that on, like, just off the top of his head.
And I wrote, I would marry him.
You should marry him.
Your wife knows you're a coward. She did. That was the thing. She wasn't like, oh, honey, she knew he was a coward. She was like, yeah, we heard them screaming. Like,
yeah.
Oh my God. And then, of course, I was like, oh, that child's been bit, hasn't she? I was like, ooh, she's been bit. She's been bit. She's been bit.
Which, like, is a real fun Chekhov's gun for us, having lived, you know, our whole lives with zombie movies being a genre. But can you imagine the mindfuck that must have been for people seeing it in theaters?
Oh, I definitely thought that that Chekhov's gun was gonna go off a lot earlier. So I thought Judy was gonna get it. I thought when they sent Judy down there, I thought she was gonna get bit by the little girl, which didn't happen. But I kept waiting again because I know the genre. I kept waiting for her to zombify. Oh, also, again, just a little tip that you wouldn't know. The writer of The Walking Dead, like the comic books, he's recently said that, because it's never said in the comic books how this happened, that it's something from space. And I never realized, because I didn't know this. I'm like, oh, it's a ref
from Venus.
He didn't say that exactly. He said it comes from space. I'm like, oh, that's why he said that. Like, every single time the television turned on, I was overjoyed because they were all hilarious. Every single one of those cutaways was hilarious. Like, I just kept waiting though when they were interviewing those military people. I was like, come on, come on. Have a zombie get them. Have a zombie get them right now while they're talking about it not being a thing.
There was a point when like the news anchor was talking and a man like walked into the background and I thought that he was going to be a zombie and he was going to eat the anchor live on air.
I really wanted that to happen. I have to feel like if this movie was made today, it definitely would. Like, you'd have more stuff like that. But I really liked this movie because I like the sort of like the play feel, as far as like, other than the cutaways, which could be done with like a voiceover and Barbara running in, it's all done with just the house. And I think that's really, I think when you don't give yourself a lot of settings, you really have to rely on your characters, which is why at the beginning I was like, Barbara's going to need to start talking like a real person. But I was like, oh, never mind. We have different characters.
Well, and this goes to a point that we made a while back in this season. This was an incredibly low budget movie. And when there are two directions you can go when you have a low budget movie, you can use that as a strength, or you can just not know what the fuck you're doing at all.
Exactly.
And they knew exactly, like this and Halloween are two really low budget movies where they knew how to work with that extremely low budget.
100%. I wrote, Cooper's going to do something dumb. I know it in my bones. I also love when he tried to grab Barbara and Ben was like, you're leaving her alone. You're doing what I say. You're shutting the fuck up.
Yes.
In that order. I was just like,
in that order.
Damn, Ben, you tell him. Wow, that did not go well. Like, when they went out to to get
the gas,
that did not go well, Rachel.
It really, really didn't. And the thing is, that kid, I have already forgotten his name, but that kid
Jimmy.
went out with
it's Jimmy, like all young boys in the 60s and 50s.
So he went out because he supposedly like knew what to do with the truck and the gas pump and everything, and he very clearly did not. I know Ben couldn't go out alone because it was a 2-person job, but I kind of feel like he would have had better luck if he had gone alone.
Why did Judy run out?
I don't know, just to ruin everything. Like
I didn't really see at first I thought Cooper, like I knew Cooper wasn't going to let them back in, but I thought she was seeing that. And then I realized she wasn't. And so I didn't know what it was that made her do that. But there was way too much of a pause between him getting out of the truck and then realizing she wasn't and going back to her, where I honestly thought she was committing suicide. Because like, but then she was like, my coat's stuck. But it was like, there was such a pause that I was like, it would be a lot more panicky. Like, my coat, like, and I was like, what are you doing? Also, I can't believe they shot at the gas tank, at the pump.
I mean, it worked. So.
It did. But when he wouldn't and Ben burst down the door and then beat the crap out of him, I was like, yes, this is the kind of stuff that they don't do enough anymore, which is when someone acts like that in a movie, like it's usually like they yell at them, but I'm like, beat him up. Like he's gone from being totally useless to a hindrance. He tried to kill Ben, basically. The absolute worst. And then, of course, I know what's going to happen because I've seen this, but when they're interviewing, I was like, and then they mentioned the same town, and I was like, is that the exact mob that's going to murder Ben? And it was.
It was.
And like, but it also, I do love that this movie accurately depicts what I've always thought about a zombie apocalypse, which is that it could be easily handled.
Yes. By,
just like,
you know,
very
the world's
easily.
Largest military. Like,
yes. And you don't even like having a gun in this situation is great, but you don't need one because if they're not like 28 days later zombies, which I think those are the fast moving zombies, you just have to hit them in the head with like a very long instrument so you're not getting too close to them.
Right.
And they're gone. Like the idea that you could get rid of it in a couple of days, like, and be able, and also technology, like in our day and age, there'd be people like tweeting like headshot, burn the bodies. Like, and we'll be like, oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
Like there'd be like a TikTok setup being like, okay, this is what you do if you encounter the undead. Now, I'm using a pistol, but you can use any gun you have at home or a hammer. My friend will be using a hammer to show you that way. Like, I've always felt like it would get it, much like how when we talked about Banjo Dog's Face movie.
Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Yes. When we talked about Invasion of the Body Snatchers, we talked about how most alien invasion should end with our complete annihilation, but they don't. Most zombie apocalypses should be with us winning, but they never are. Like, they're always with the complete destruction of the world. And I'm sort of like, I guess there are probably people who are thinking if you watched Fear, you know how it would happen, but I don't watch Fear, so I don't know how it happened. I just assume it did.
Yeah, which doesn't mean that there's nothing scary about a zombie apocalypse. The thing is, you have to survive the night, maybe a couple of days.
Yes.
Which is still scary. It's still a scary couple of days until the military shows up, which, again, this movie does very well. It's one night until a bunch of people with guns show up.
And the thing is that I almost think that there's a level of tension then with the idea of knowing that you're waiting for something to come. They didn't know they were waiting. But if you knew, then it is really about surviving the night. And that adds like stakes to the sense of like, this isn't going to go on forever. They just need to make it till sunrise. Right. Like that kind of thing. I don't know why they gave up on the Molotov cocktails. They should have thrown more of them. Like, they had a lot of jars. And that was a good plan because they're destroyed by fire and they're afraid of fire. It was a good plan. And like, I don't know why we stopped doing that.
I don't know. I was mostly thinking about how I've always wanted to huck a Molotov cocktail.
I've always wanted to huck a grenade. Which is the same energy, but a different.
I'm an Aries, you're a Libra.
Yes. Very much that energy. Another thing Ben did that was amazing was shoot him when he tried to take the gun. Yes. Or he did take the gun and was like, get down to the basement, which I was like, your daughter's there to murder everyone. Yes. And then he just shot him. And I loved that. I was like, oh, I love this. I love this song. And then she came alive and started eating him. And then she stabbed the wife with the worst instrument for stabbing, which I don't totally understand because she stabbed her, but it didn't seem like she was then eating her. Like, she just went back to eating the father. I was like, are you just like saving her?
Saving it for
like,
later.
This is another thing where I don't find it as scary because I'm like, if she was just mindlessly trying to eat her mother alive, I find that more scary than like taking a gardening tool, tool and just trying to like stab her with it. Like, I just don't find that. And apparently they can climb stairs. I got that answer for myself. Like, can they climb stairs? And then I literally wrote, this is how it is in my notebook. Back to just Barbara and Ben. Oh, wait, nope. Because as I was writing it, she died.
Yeah. Well, at least she got to see Johnny one last time. And then the rest of the movie was extremely painful because I knew what was going to happen to Ben. Yeah, that was right around the time that I was like, oh, that's right. They're going to shoot him. I also wrote, because we've talked a couple of times about, we've had a couple movies this season that just end like extremely abruptly and with no like resolution. And this movie is the same way. But this works. It's just a very abrupt, and this is another reason where I'm just like, Romero, there's no way you didn't know what you were doing because you just ended it and then you had like the credits go over like newsreel footage type stuff, like,
and then burning his body, which I was like, wow, to my husband.
You knew what those images looked like. There was no dialogue after that. It very much read as Romero being like, yeah, I said what I said and I'm done.
Do you have any more jokey stuff or are we ready? Are we ready to get into it?
I think we're ready.
Okay. I will believe that when he wrote this movie, he wasn't intending for Ben to be black. But then when he saw, and I'm sorry, last Walking Dead thing, but there's a character in The Walking Dead who's named after the actor who plays Ben.
Good.
And when they cast him, because he gave a great one, I don't believe for a second he didn't lean back in his chair and go, well, that'll be interesting, won't it? Like, I don't believe you.
I don't either.
Like,
no. There's a story that like when after they had finished filming it and like editing it and everything, he was literally like driving it somewhere when Dr. King was assassinated. He says he was kind of like, huh. And I don't believe you. Like, I don't believe you, Romero. Like, I don't believe that was the first time it ever occurred to you. I think you said that because it was 1968 and you wanted to be able to make more movies after this, which is fine. But like, 100%. You've made so many movies and you were the king of zombies. You can admit it now.
Be like, yeah, I did do it. I do exactly what I was doing. Like, I was trying to think if it's, to me, the most heartbreaking ending in horror, and it's up there for me because Ben did everything right.
Yep.
And Ben was a great horror hero. He was great. And he was noble, but without being so stupid that I'm like, maybe not be so stupid about it. Like, he beat the shit out of Cooper. Like, he knew what he was doing. The other reason I call bullshit is then why not have another single black man in this, Romero? Because there isn't. Like, nowhere. It's not even like he threw some of them into the gun mob. And I'm like, oh, so they're all white men. But you weren't saying anything.
No.
About.
Definitely not.
They just shot him. They didn't even yell out to be like, hey, are you a person? Because they don't speak, apparently. So you could just, and he's far enough away that you could have been like, are you a person? And he'd be like, I am. They'd be like, sweet. Yep. Like, no, they just shot him in the head without knowing. It's brutal. Like, it's so senseless that having that at the end, especially since it's not as heavy on the zombies as some later movies do. There's a lot, I'm sorry, there's a lot of commentary in this.
Right.
And like, it's there. And I almost think it's better because they don't explicitly, like, Cooper at no point is outwardly racist. And I think that's better. Right. That it isn't like, ooh, see, and like, he just was like, I'm not going to take orders from a black man. It's like, ooh, like, no, he was just being,
that's part of it.
Yes. You just know when you're watching it that that's part of it and like part of his issue. Like, but you don't have to, but you're not get gotten off the hook by him being explicitly racist. Because that's a good way to make people feel separated from characters.
Right.
Whereas like when they're performing microaggressions, it's more difficult to separate yourself as a white person. But it was incredible. Like, he was, and also you're talking about casting someone when there had never been a horror movie with a black lead before. And again, he's so good and competent and right about everything. And everyone who else is in it is white and just different shades of like fucking it up. Like,
yeah. And it still doesn't matter. Like,
no.
And I am obviously not the first person who's ever said this, but there's no way this movie becomes a classic if Ben is a white man. There's no way. Because like, the studio didn't even copyright this movie. This movie is in the public domain, which is how I have it on DVD with like a huge collection of other old horror movies, because those are all in the public domain. Like, they didn't know what they had, and they wouldn't have had it had Ben been a white actor.
That's because without Ben as a black man, this plays like a bad 70s movie where it's like back in, the 70s, there'd be all those sci-fi movies that ended in really messed up ways, or like a not very good Twilight Zone. And I say not very good because most Twilight Zones are boss. But this plays like a really good one, like a great movie. And also like one of those like really classic, which like it's the same era where it's like, oh, okay. Like, so the aliens were doing it, or it's like, so, okay, you just shot him. You just shot him in the head.
Yep. Never and then he might be human.
And then then we watch you burn his body, like just drag him out. Like, it's all so sad. Like, and it's, again, I just can't get over how he just did everything right. Like, that's also why it's so tragic, because like he did everything right. And I also think, as far as movies being made today, I don't think the message that comes across I think it would need a very specific director, because a lot of times when people who are trying to like make this kind of a point, sometimes they make it they don't make it seem organic. Yeah, whereas this felt so organic. Yes. Like, we're trying to teach you something. This was like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
right.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, you know, in your bones, if it had been Barbara on that window, they wouldn't have shot without yelling out.
Mm-hmm.
Which I kind of thought in my head, how would it have played out if Barbara had been alive and would have seen them and would have known what they had done, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she probably wouldn't have said anything because who knows if she was ever going to speak again.
That's true. She probably would have started screaming, so that would have been a clue.
And it would have been a great move into the 70s
Yes.
female heroines who just scream all the time.
Scream all the time, and that's how our movie ends.
And then every director in the 70s watched it and went, huh, it's a good thing to do. Maybe they should do that all the time.
Oh, man.
I did, of course, have to go to his Wikipedia page after this.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a big
Romero's
teacher.
Or Dwayne's?
No, Dwayne's. He was a teacher. He died really young, sadly.
Oh.
Yeah, he had a heart problem, it seemed like. And so he passed away. But at one point he said that he was afraid everyone only recognized him as Ben. And I'm like, they do. I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you. You were in this movie.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's kind of what happens when you have such an iconic role.
Uh-huh. No, I don't believe him. I will never believe, even if it wasn't intentional from the beginning, I never believed that he watched those scenes play out between Ben and Cooper, watched Cooper beat the ever-loving shit out of Ben, watched him slap a white woman, and was just like, this hits the same. This is the same. I don't believe that.
No, I was going to say I would maybe believe it if Romero were white, but even so, I wouldn't. Like, even white people aren't that thick. Like,
no. Also, just admit it at a certain point. Yes. It's like everyone, it's like one of those things where it's like, you know what? Yeah, I knew what I was doing. I did it. It's like, yeah, you did.
Yeah.
It's an old movie. It's an old movie.
It's just weird to me because, like, when I was, real little, I used to think of the 60s as being 30 years ago. Weirdly enough, another 25 years has gone by.
Not to be this person, but they're making a new Wonder Years, and it takes place during the 90s.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
So it used to be, it used to be, it was in the 80s and took place, and it was made in the 80s, but took place to the 60s. And now it's just, he's a little kid in the 90s. So,
Oof. I mean, I guess I should have seen this coming with, WandaVision having that 90s sitcom episode, and then even newer ones, and oh God, I should have known this was coming.
But yeah, I'm really happy that we were able to watch one of these classic movies that held up.
Yeah.
Like one of these classic movies that we weren't like dragging the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me really interested because I think zombies is the one thing that neither of us are that into. Mm-hmm. So like we have our different areas, but neither of us are that into zombie movies. So I haven't seen that many zombie movies.
Neither have I. Which is very weird because, like, I like slashers, but I also like creature features. And zombies are technically a creature feature, but they're their own genre, so it's not as fun for me as like a shark that's been bred with an octopus.
They've gotten really. I feel like a lot of horror movie or a lot of zombie horror movies have gotten really gritty in the sense of like, who's the real villain when who is the real monsters? And I'm like, I get it. It's us. Like, it's us. I get it.
It was always us. They are us.
Yes, I get it. Like, just shoot it in the head. Okay, we can have this discussion later.
Mm-hmm.
All right. You're up.
All right.
We wouldn't survive. No one would survive.
Nobody survives, yeah.
Although,
I was gonna say, maybe if we were in like the world, but a completely different situation.
I was gonna say maybe we would, but then we would probably end up like in my fake scenario with Ben dead at our feet and this mob coming in and being like, huh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I do feel like we could have thrown off the whole dynamic by being two more people who were reasonable and been like, he's right. Like, you see how he's right, though. And we would have brought more than just tiny little pegs of wood.
And you would have thrown all those you never would have stopped throwing those cocktails.
I never would have stopped.
You would have been like, this is my plan.
They would have been back in the house and I would have just still been hucking them. Like,
you were like, this is my artistic expression.
I would have had to be slapped. Just get me to stop throwing them. And I would be like, you know what? Fair. I got carried away.
You just start lighting all jars as like you just start filling up like flower pots and stuff so you can throw them. And it's like, I think we can leave now because she set them all on fire. Like the entire yard's on fire. Like I think now our problem's the fire.
The
It
fire.
might be the fire now.
Oh.
All right, tell me a story.
Okay, so I decided to go back to my tradition of using this podcast to give little like socio-historical lessons. And I used a PBS web series, I guess, called Monstrum. They did a 3-part series on zombies. I only really watched the first one. I wanted to watch all of them, but I needed to stay on task. A New York Times op-ed. There's an episode of NPR's Code Switch about it. I was using like the article version, and a BBC Culture article. So I kind of hinted this earlier, but Romero never called them zombies. He claimed that there was no link between what he created and what we knew of as zombies at the time. He actually based it on book or short story I Am Legend, which in the movie they make them zombies because that's what we understand zombies to be now. But at the time they were basically vampires. So I'm going to talk about what zombies were before Romero came along and changed the entire genre. So picture it. Haiti, 18th century. I'm glad you enjoyed that because that's the last laugh you're going to have for a long time.
Okay, then can I make a joke?
Yes.
Just on the idea of you telling me to picture Haiti in a year in like the 1800s. Yeah, or 18th century. Like, oh yeah, I've got a definite mental picture of what Haiti looks like in different centuries. Like I'm picturing it.
Okay. Well, don't worry, I'm going to help you picture it.
Okay.
This is when it's under French colonial rule, and it's called Saint-Domingue. And I don't know how much you know about French colonialism in Haiti, but it was particularly bad. 90% of the population were enslaved. A third of the Atlantic slave trade ended up, like the people that were abducted, ended up in Haiti. And half of those people died within the first few years that they lived in Haiti because they were worked so hard. Just like brutal. So the term zombie actually has its roots in what they think are some different African languages, and the idea has its roots in West African beliefs. So without getting too deep into the weeds of voodoo or hoodoo or all of those things, like they're syncretic religions that kind of developed from different West African beliefs with a little bit of Roman Catholicism put in there. Because when you take a bunch of people from a bunch of different areas and force them to be the same group, that's kind of just what happens. So one of the fundamental beliefs of voodoo is that there are 2 parts to the soul. There's basically like your physical body, and then there's your mind. And both your physical body and your mind can be stolen. So that's kind of where the idea of a zombie comes from. Like it's a body with no mind. And because of these just like horrible working conditions they were living under, life conditions, a lot of the people who were working as slaves in Haiti died by suicide. But here's a little bit of the Roman Catholicism in here. If you die by suicide, you can't move on to the afterlife. So basically, you're a zombie at that point, which is a belief that they would use to kind of control the people who were enslaved. You have to keep working because if you die by suicide, you're not going to get to go to the afterlife. So you need to die some other way. Just the worst thing. But then in 1804, the Haitian Revolution occurred, which honestly was inevitable because, like I said, 90% of the population were enslaved. Like, obviously, at some point, like you can't oppress that many people because at some point they're gonna go, wow, there are a lot more of us than there are of you. So good for them. And right around this like time is when the idea of the zombie morphs slightly. So it becomes more that when you die, it takes your soul some time to move on to the afterlife. And in that time, your body can be stolen and reanimated and controlled by someone. So that's so at that point, that's what a zombie is. A zombie is someone who has died, but then somebody stole their body and is using it to continue to enslave them, which a lot of scholars will argue, like, you can see elements to how close they were always, like how close the threat was that they were going to end up with a system of enslavement again after the revolution, which I can't say much about. I don't know a whole lot about Haitian history, but basically the US doesn't know a whole lot about this until the US occupation of Haiti from 1915 to 1934. And that's when the story of zombies comes to the United States. So a lot of this is mixed in with the idea that Haiti is this backwards country because it's run by Black people. So, you know, when you think of what you know about voodoo today, it's a lot of really negative stereotypes. We kind of touched on that with the Child's Play, and it's because it comes from Haiti. Did you want to say something?
No, I just realized that I was going, but I put my mic down so no one could tell that I was just like making listening noises. Yeah. So I was like, picked up my mic, just go,
Cool. The big story was a book called The Magic Island in 1927 by William Seabrook. And I am going to read you this sentence in the BBC Culture article that I want you and everybody listening to know that for every word in this sentence, I would rather swallow a nail than say it out loud into a microphone. But I had to read this sentence, so other people need to hear it. Also, there are 20 words in this sentence, so I'd literally rather swallow 20 nails one by one than read this out loud. But I'm not going to be the only one haunted by this. So, the BBC Culture article, quote, Seabrook was a self-proclaimed Negrophile, a man who embraced primitivism as an ecstatic escape from his privileged white Southern origins. Thoughts?
My joke thought is, would you even swallow a nail for the was? And my non-joke thoughts is gross.
Yeah, right?
Gross.
Like what a gross man.
Like, what a gross thing. What a gross man. Also, can we just talk about people having spiritual beliefs that are not Christianity, that are valid and sacred and beautiful, and just manipulated to like believe that they're just like terrible things, like terrible or backwards, or there's a lot of stuff like that with the beliefs of the indigenous people of this land, but also all lands.
All of them, yeah.
Where their beliefs were really powerful and really layered and were really condensed to be something mocked. And it's like, shut up. Like,
yeah, because like I said, the one basic belief that we've talked about is the idea that your soul is two parts. It's your mind and your body. Like, I feel like that's pretty true of Judeo-Christian beliefs too. Like, there's your physical body and then there's your mind, and all together that makes up like something greater than the sum of its parts. Like, this specific idea has its roots in living under a brutal colonial enslavement. But anyway, Seabrook wrote this book, The Magic Island, which kind of brings the idea and the word zombie, maybe not the word, maybe it came up, but it really popularizes the idea of zombies as based in Haitian beliefs. There's a chapter called Dead Men Working in the Cane Fields where he goes to a plantation because he wants to see some zombies, and describes them like working almost like mindlessly. And he ultimately decides that they're not actually like zombies. They're not the dead reanimated to work mindlessly, but they're just people who are being exploited.
Wait, hold on. Is this the character in his book does this, or he as a man went to a plantation in the South and looked at the people working there and was like, are you zombies? Like,
well, he was in Haiti, and I'm not sure if it was a fictional book or if it was like memoirs. I really don't know. And I wasn't gonna look it up. Like,
but I'm just
I already know too much about this man.
Okay, go on.
But that chapter directly inspires the movie White Zombie, which came out in 1935. it's not really starring Bela Lugosi, but any movie that has Bela Lugosi is starring Bela Lugosi. Have you ever seen White Zombie, Meg?
I think it won't surprise you to know I haven't.
Do you want to know something else not surprising?
You have?
I have.
Yeah.
So when I watched it, I did not know all of this context. I was just very confused because it's in that same box set that Night of the Living Dead is in.
Oh, okay.
And the fact that it was called White Zombie, like it had zombie in the title, was very confusing to me because I was like, didn't Romero invent zombies? So I watched it. And I'm going to try to describe the plot of this movie to you just from my memory of having seen it 5 years ago. Except I will tell you, because I was reading this history over and over again, it is about, they are in Haiti, and it is about a plantation owner who drugs a woman to turn her into a zombie. I think he's going to marry her. And Bela Lugosi is the one who gives him the poison, I think. And by describe the plot, I mean, I'm going to describe various scenes to you that I remember. I'm pretty sure this plantation owner is the reincarnated spirit of an Egyptian pharaoh, because the movie opens with a scene of him being carried in, those chairs that have the poles where 4 people carry you in.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember it specifically because I was watching it, and this actor is white and playing an Egyptian pharaoh, so that obviously caught my attention. But then also all the slaves carrying him are black, and they are the only black people in a movie set in Haiti, which I thought was kind of weird. And I can't remember if he was scorned by a woman, if he's trying to turn this new woman in the present day, the 30s, into a woman who already existed. It hits a lot of the same notes as The Mummy, honestly.
Okay, I was thinking that. I was like, isn't that the thing of the mummy? So remember, he's not the pharaoh though, he's the priest, but yes.
Right. Because you'll remember I watched The Mummy for the first time with you within the past year. And as I was watching it, it just all seemed very familiar to me. And then I was rereading all this stuff and I was like, oh, right. Because it's the same as the plot of White Zombie. But anyway, that's what the term zombie meant up until Night of the Living Dead came out. And that's why Romero never called them zombies, because what he wrote had nothing to do with these zombies that already existed on film and in Haitian beliefs. So yes, that's my story. It's not a little history lesson. It's a history lesson.
I love a little history lesson. History is stories.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, if we're thinking about what's worse,
slavery is worse. Slavery is worse. We're going to be really controversial here and say slavery is worse.
And everything that you described as far as books and stuff sound a lot worse than anything I've ever read. So, yeah. All right. So guys, next week we are hitting you with a modern movie, The Possession.
That's how you know I didn't pick it.
Yes, it's The Possession. And Rachel had pointed out there were a lot of movies with the word possession in it. So this is the 2011-2012 with Jeffrey Dean Morgan and Keira Sedgwick. So if you're looking to watch along with us, it's that Possession. And we will hit you up with that. Make sure you are following us and have liked the page on Facebook and on Instagram, that you've reviewed on Apple Podcast. And, any of those posts that we have, click the share, put it to your followers. Podcasts, word of mouth is really how they spread. So yeah, do that. And
thank you.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.